seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the crash of Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
Beautiful morning, I'm off to work, hustling to the car, still buttoning my shirt. Like every other day, I turn on the radio. There's something about planes crashing and buildings burning. The minutes passing by, I'm still learning what's going on. Nobody knows. It's the day the lights went out, the day they came back on, the day our hearts were broken and our spirits strong. I always will remember the way we came together, mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger, I'll always remember. Same time each year, it comes back on the news. These images and tragedies just giving me the blues. I look at my life, who I am and how I feel. I wanna be a better mother and better person, better friend to those who are hurting, and make sure the moments in my life are real. It's the day the lights went out, the day the lights came on, the day our hearts were broken and our spirits strong. I always will remember the way we came together, mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger, I'll always remember. It's the day the lights went out, the day the lights came on, the day we got it right, the day we got it wrong. It's the day when we were weak, the day when we were strong, the day we found a better way. The way we came together, mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger,
first of all thank all of you for coming today. It's nice to see you all here. I know there's certainly trying circumstances with the weather we've had lately. Mother Nature certainly hasn't cooperated, has she? Now, one of the questions I've heard is, I ask, why are we doing this? Well, we wish to give our perspective on the events of 9/11, because we know that theists will have plenty of places to give theirs, churches and so on. So we want to give our perspective on it. And we think that's important because we're going to be a little bit different than the things they refer to saying. Now, we have some very good speakers coming up, people very eloquent, much more eloquent than I am, so I'll be very brief and get out of here. Now, one thing I would like to do is lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, not the original, but the one that was used prior to 1954, the one that includes all Americans, not just theists. So if you would join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Bob. He's going to go up here and be much more eloquent than I am.
You hope. Well, thanks, George. I'm not sure I'm as eloquent as you introduced me to be, but I'm going to try to be. Good morning, everyone. 10 years today, a nation watched in horror as 19 fundamentalist Islamic terrorists boarded 4 planes and claimed nearly 3,000 lives, injuring more than 6,000 others. Not to mention the families and friends of all those victims, their lives touched by this disaster in immeasurable ways. It would be tempting to stand here and analyze the fundamentalist beliefs that led to the attacks, but instead today, I'd like to take some time to talk about the victims of those attacks. It's no secret that we stand here as an atheist organization who rejects the idea of God. Our intellectual beliefs don't allow us to take comfort by saying those victims, at the very least, are in God's hands now. What we can do is keep my pad on. I apologize. What we do instead is recognize the gravity of that loss and to take some time to mourn the dead, believer and non-believer alike, and to use that grief to remember some very important lessons. For us, this attack conveyed a special kind of horror. 3,000 lives snuffed out forever because those terrorists simply wanted to make a point for their make-believe God. Should we refrain from mentioning that it was dogma that was used to convince those people to sacrifice their lives for the God they believed in? Is there a simpler definition of evil than the taking of lives for no other purpose than to make your own point and forward your own dogma? In this country, one of our founding principles is the freedom of speech. That same principle, the very first amendment to our Constitution, also grants us the freedom of religion and the freedom from religion. The ability to engage in discussion without the fear of your own life, liberty, and property. It is that rationally derived principle that allows us to stand here today and give this talk. It also lets us recognize the importance of requiring the dogma of all types to be challenged. On Tuesday morning, September 11, 2001, as most of us were heading into work, we heard about the results of unchallenged dogma. We mourned the loss of those lives, tragically and unnecessarily ended by fundamentalist zealots. However, the loss of that life also gives the opportunity to give thanks. Not to a God, but to the people who gave help during that crisis. To the firefighter and police officer that when hearing the call to go to work, didn't stop and pray, but who ran into danger and saved lives and kept order. To the memory of those people in Flight 93 who, when realizing that people who hijacked that plane did not intend to ransom them for demands, took matters into their own hands to try and save the lives of other people. Those who risked life and limb to search for survivors in the wreckage of the towers, the Pentagon, and Flight 93, and those volunteers who gave of their own time and money to help the survivors and families of those victims. As we remember these events, victims and survivors, we look to the future. I would hope that as a country and a world, we would continue to remember a better way to manage our disagreements through reasoned discourse and debate. That we put aside the dogmas of the past and use the tools of science and philosophy to examine our beliefs of what is right and what is wrong, and for our leaders to choose the best reasoned course for humanity. As humanists, we can do no less. Thank you for all for your time today.
Good morning. I'm proud to be a part of this program today that is being held to pay tribute to those who perished 10 years ago today. This is a day of honoring their lives and the deaths of those people. It is a day of remembering the many lives they touched. However, as we recall these loved ones, if we look deeply and honestly into our minds and into our hearts, we come to the distressing realization that this tragedy did not have to happen. We will see that it was the consequence of religious fanaticism. Unlike, nervous first time public speaking, unless something changes, these tragedies will continue and do in fact continue every day around the world. What needs to change is our thoughts, our attitudes, and our beliefs. Just suppose, think about it. Suppose, as in John Lennon's words, we begin to imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say that I'm a dreamer, and you're welcome to join in if you like. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Thank you.
Please remain seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the crash of Flight 175 into the South Tower of the World Trade Center.
We stand in honor for those who have died and shed our tears for the pain of the innocent lives. We stand in mourning, we stand in awe and raise our hero volunteers who answered America's call. All the fiberglass, the steel fell like rain. Forced our heart to see it all and be part of the pain as we watched it all unfold before our eyes. The sadness, the madness, the sorrow took over our lives. So remember as you pass by our stars and stripes that wave, for their honor, it's our tribute for those Americans on the 11th day. They thought they'd take us down as we watched the towers explode. With our eyes we saw through their madness as the stories unfold. Yet united we stand, united we belong. Throughout the pain and our suffering, America still stands strong. All the fiberglass, the steel, it fell like rain. Forced our heart to feel it all and be part of the pain as our devastation fell from our eyes. We'll never be the same again. for the rest of our lives. So remember as you pass by our stars and stripes set wave, for their honor is our tribute for those Americans on that day. And remember as you pass by our stars and stripes that wave, for their honor, it's our tribute for all those Americans who gave their lives on the 11th day.
Good morning. My name is Mickey Weidman. I'm an American atheist. I'm going to be reading Justified Belief and Church-State Separation in the Light of 9/11, Not Just Atheist Issues, by Justin Vicula. Justin Vicula received bachelor's degrees in psychology and philosophy from King's College in Pennsylvania, and is the co-organizer, spokesperson, and one of the board members of the Northeastern Pennsylvania Free Thought Society, a secular discussion and activist group of non-theists. He also manages a personal website and blog at justinvicula.com discussing philosophy, atheism, and theism, among other topics, and writes articles as the Scranton Atheism Examiner for Examiner.com. Justin was not able to attend this event due to prior commitments, but he offers the following thoughts concerning the importance of holding justified beliefs and the separation of church and state in light of 9/11. One cannot deny that beliefs inform our actions. Our beliefs translate into actions that have the ability to inform others' beliefs, harm or help others, and establish our quality of life. While we may not be compelled to fly planes into buildings because of the beliefs we hold, this does not diminish the importance of holding justified beliefs. Philosopher Jonathan Bonvig, in his book, The Value of Knowledge and the Pursuit of Understanding, writes, "Without beliefs to guide decisions about what actions to perform, we would be reduced to the position of random selection of actions, hoping that one selected was useful." Philosopher Richard Taylor argues that truth is worth seeking because it saves one from the numberless substitutes that are constantly invented and tirelessly peddled to the simple-minded, usually with stunning success. It saves us from these glittering gems and baubles, promises and dogmas, and seeds and creeds that are worth no more than the stones under one's feet. While it is the case that we cannot be absolutely certain about beliefs, we can proportion our beliefs with available evidence, argument, and reason in order to hold informed beliefs and make informed decisions in our daily lives. Faith, belief held without adequate evidence, argument, or reason, such as the terrorists who flew planes into the Twin Towers had, as we reflect today, resulted in devastation. Faith is not a reliable means to attaining justified belief and is no good reason to hold a belief. If a belief held because of faith is correct, it was not correct because it was based on faith, but rather was correct for some other reason. It is easy to see the consequences of faith-based beliefs when thinking about 9/11, but such consequences need not be so grand in order for one to care about holding justified beliefs. If we care about holding justified beliefs, we are far less likely to harm others and ourselves, and are far more likely to contribute to mankind, help others, and help ourselves. Care for evidence and need for justification of beliefs should be everyone's concern in all areas of life, rather than simply holding beliefs because of tradition, utility, comfort, or indoctrination. One should not allow certain beliefs, no matter how cherished they may be, to be above criticism or at a different level than others not requiring justification. If more people cared about holding justified beliefs and proportioning their beliefs to the evidence, we should expect more compassion and a more productive society. Author Sam Harris writes, "I know of no society in human history that ever suffered because its people became too desirous of evidence in support of their core beliefs." This, again, is not just a concern for atheists, but rather should be a concern for everyone. If instead of holding faith-based beliefs based on the Quran that inspired the attacks on 9/11, and instead people were more skeptical about their beliefs, it might have been the case that we would not even be here today holding a 9/11 remembrance event. Even if the terrorist attacks would have happened for some other reason instead of a faith-based belief, this still does not diminish the importance of holding justified beliefs. Looking into the future, instead of viewing faith as some sort of intellectually virtuous belief, we should be consistent in all areas of life and globally apply skepticism. We surely would not praise a person who had faith in some sort of alleged medical cure that is not backed by evidence whatsoever, by any evidence whatsoever. Another issue that is important for many atheists, although it should be important for every American citizen, is the separation of church and state. Many have false impressions of what this phrase, tracing back to Thomas Jefferson in his address to the Danbury Baptists, actually means. Separation of church and state does not only mean in legal terms that the government is barred from declaring an official state religion, but rather means that the government should be completely neutral in matters of religion. Government should not favor religion over non-religion, or favor one religion over another religion. Separation of church and state is important because in the eyes of the government, all religious beliefs, or lack thereof, are viewed as equal. Some Muslims and Christians, and perhaps others, unjustly believe that the United States is a Christian nation. The unsubstantiated belief of the United States as a Christian nation fuels the myth of the war with Islam, and it would not be much of a stretch to say that this belief is a threat to national security. While the majority of people in the United States may be Christians, this does not make the United States a Christian nation any more than a majority of Caucasians would make the United States a white nation. One simply needs to read the Treaty of Tripoli, a document unanimously ratified by the United States Congress and signed by President John Adams, to realize that the United States, as the document itself says, is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Separation of church and state, whether people realize it or not, is what guarantees freedom of and freedom from religion. And this falsifies the notion that the United States is a Christian nation that is at war with Islam. We best not fan the flames of what are seen to be religious wars, misrepresent the secular character of our nation, or distort history. It is also the case, because of the idea of the United States as a Christian nation, that non-Christians are viewed as somehow being un-American, or even worse, enemies of America, trying to destroy the foundations of the country, which some believe to be Christian principles. The United States, as the Treaty of Tripoli suggests, is not founded on the Christian religion. America rather was founded on principles of freedom, liberty, and enlightenment values. Further, the Creator mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, which is not a founding document such as the United States Constitution and has no legal standing, is properly understood as a deistic God, one which created the universe but has no concern for human affairs. Mentions of natural rights in the documents of the Founding Fathers are not, as some religious individuals think, references to a Christian or any specific God. Many of our Founding Fathers were either deistic or non-religious. John Adams, in A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America, wrote that the original states were founded on the natural authority of the people alone, without a pretense of miracle or mystery, and which are destined to spread over the northern part of that whole quarter of the globe, are a great point gained in the favor of the rights of mankind. No matter what the Founding Fathers believed, their intentions were clear. They wanted a separation of church and state and made sure to make no references to God in the United States Constitution, but rather references to religion in the Constitution, that there should be no religious test for public office, and that no law should be made respecting an establishment of religion. Separate religion from the government. The need for holding justified beliefs and the principle of separation of church and state are very important to consider in the wake of the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Immediately following 9/11 and even today, some also believe that all Muslims are terrorists and that all Muslims hate America. These false beliefs have led to violence, discrimination, profiling, and the like. Further failures in critical thinking led people, even to this day, to levy conspiracy theories suggesting that 9/11 was actually an inside job by the United States government, a position that is not based on reason, argument, or evidence. It is also the case that atheists, rather than the religious, who may privately or publicly rebuke their fundamentalists and extremists, are the ones who are loudest speaking against the dangers that result from religion and faith. Those who may call themselves religious moderates ought to speak about these issues and police those of their religions instead of distancing, insisting the fundamentalists and extremists are of completely different camps, or even saying they don't follow the true religion. We should all agree, even if we disagree on other issues, that holding justified beliefs and defending a separation of church and state is important. These are not atheist issues, but rather should be thought of as issues for all American citizens to care about.
Morning, folks. I'm Turk, and I'd just like to say a few words. Atheists have served this nation proudly, honorably, and with distinction in every decade of its history. There were atheists at Bunker Hill. There were atheists at Gettysburg. There were atheists at Belleau Wood. There were atheists at Bastogne. There were atheists at Quezon. And there were atheists at the Twin Towers. We suffer the same losses others do. While I was serving in the U.S. military, I learned a valuable lesson. It's an important lesson for all Americans, and it's a simple lesson. When they zip you into that ugly green body bag, nothing else matters. It does not matter if you have a name that others find difficult to pronounce. It does not matter what ethnic group you belong to. It does not matter what the color of your skin is. It does not matter what gender you are. It does not matter what religion you are or what religion you are not. These things simply do not matter. What does matter, the only thing that matters, is that in the end, we're all equal. We're all exactly alike in green vinyl. At this time, I'm honored to introduce a fellow veteran. Jason Torby is president of the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, a national non-profit community for non-theistic veterans. He also holds seats on the board of Secular Coalition for America and the American Humanist Association. Since 1994, Jason has been active with the non-theistic community, addressing issues of separation of church and state, and equal opportunity for non-theistic service members in Army basic training, Army parachutist training, military academy programs, and in combat situations. He is a graduate of West Point and holds an MBA from Ohio State University. Jason was commissioned as an officer and served for 5 years in Germany, Kuwait, and Iraq with the Army's 1st Armored Division. He left the service in 2005 with the rank of captain. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jason Torby.
I want to open by talking about why I'm here today. 9/11 is a tragedy, not a holiday or a political platform or reason to justify or condemn different ideologies. Proper activities to mark the anniversary of a tragedy did not include media blitzes, profiteering or recruiting. Proper activities include respect and consolation for the families of the victims. Also included, I think, is a solemn effort to learn from the tragedy, both the causes of the tragedy and our reactions. It is this latter activity that I hope to focus on today. How do we react to 9/11? How can we prevent the next 9/11? How can we better react when the next tragedy happens? As we've heard today, on 9/11, 2001, 3,000 people died, thousands more were injured. This was a coordinated series of 4 hijackings by 19 al-Qaeda operatives. In the dismay of such a large attack on U.S. soil, the institution of patriotic, xenophobic, religious, and militaristic fervor instilled in the population by our leaders has resulted in a decade of wars and the degeneration of a century of American goodwill around the world. Everyone knows these basic, terrible facts. I fought in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. For over a year, I served with the Army's 1st Armored Division, first holding Baghdad, and then moving to quell a political Shia uprising south of Baghdad. I deployed to Iraq to help the Iraqis. But what the purpose of that war was, how it's turned out, and even at the time, whether I could be successful was always under question. Many other people, soldiers, leaders, voters, had many other purposes in mind. A Christian crusade to convert Muslims, a corporate push to seize Middle East oil, a breakup of a terrorist stronghold, a defensive action to stop a nuclear attack, an imperialistic expansion of Western dominance, simple vengeance, and even blind, stupid politics. On Big Think, David Rovick, a Harvard instructor specializing in risk and fear, recently wrote, "The Iraq War was possible only because the American public was afraid." All those reasons, in some combination, were held by all the soldiers in Iraq and the leaders that sent soldiers to Iraq. All those reasons were in the mind of American allies, American enemies, and the people we were trying to liberate. But what were the right reasons? Were any of those reasons valid? I don't have the answers, but as we continue these wars and consider the next war in Libya, in Somalia, in Egypt, in Iran, or Russia, or China, I hope we reject corporate interests and imperial interests, and most of all, fear and vengeance. Some people say proudly that they are already against the next war, but can we comfortably rest in a cocoon of pacifism, ignoring cries for help from the oppressed, calls for support from our allies, and threats of vengeance from those who wish to do us harm? When we have humanitarian and purely defensive goals, military actions is sometimes the only recourse in a violent world. Silent protests, airlifts of food, diplomatic action, coordination with NGOs are all part of the tool set. But war is also an option with all its terrible consequences. We should not enter into it without understanding and clear goals. Invasion of Afghanistan was the immediate response to 9/11, barely a month after the attacks. The Afghanistan war has always been on a smaller scale, always been more closely related to the 9/11 attacks, and always been easier to label as a purely defensive action intended to root terrorists out of their home in Taliban territory. In fact, my original order to Iraq was for Operation Enduring Freedom, the Afghanistan War operation. The character of that war and its continuance provided the military and political foundations for expansion of military action in Iraq. And in Iraq, we expanded from purely defensive motives to many other more questionable purposes. As we reflect on 9/11, we pause to remember thousands who died. As atheists and humanists, we know that they are gone in the literal sense, but we can focus on their legacy and what we, the living, how we, the living, may grow from the tragedy, or if we are not careful, how we may perpetuate that tragedy. Our reactions as a nation have resulted in over 6,000 U.S. dead in continuing wars, as well as those dead from coalition forces. The smallest estimates put the civilian casualties at well over 100,000. The near-term economic costs of 9/11 attacks were about $100 billion in lost GDP and rebuilding costs. The cost of war is impossible to pin down, but it's certainly well over $1 trillion. Add to that the cost of eradication of American goodwill, the expansion of executive war authority, and the personal freedoms lost in the Patriot Act. Everyone should think very hard about whether they would trade those costs for another 9/11. Last month, the International Humanist and Ethical Union held their triennial World Congress with a focus on peace. As represented from the U.S. and from the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, I presented on humanists and military service. One key argument I made was the influence that we, as rationalists, skeptics, humanists, and ethical atheists, can bring to both jus in bello and jus ad bello. That is the entry into just war and the execution of war in a just manner. As humanists, we have the opportunity to promote humanitarian rather than vengeful reaction to terrorism and tragedy. I can't say what the right response was to 9/11. I can't say whether invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan or the continuance of either of these wars for so long was necessary to defend the United States. But I can't help but wonder if the forces of terrorism could have withstood $1 trillion of schools and roads and hospitals. It's easy to fall into the animosity of us and them, but humanity is not so diverse. In viewing a picture of the Earth taken by a space probe as it left the solar system, Carl Sagan saw a pale blue dot. About this pale blue dot that was Earth, Sagan said, from this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of competent religions and ideologies and economic systems, every hunter and forager, every hero and every coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, every child, inventor and explorer, teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, and every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived here, on a mote of dust suspended in the sunbeam. This means that even in the face of tragedy, when the world swells from a tiny, pale blue dot to a monstrous and frightening eye of pain and misery, we must remember that we're all in this together. With all of our differences and fears and hurts and desires, we must see people as people, equal in worth and dignity. Even when we take up arms in order to free the oppressed from tyrants, it must be to bring us closer together and not merely to punish and destroy our brothers and sisters who may look different or live far away. We humanists have no monopoly on morality. It is absolutely essential that we join hands with those Christians and Muslims and Jews and spiritual persons who identify more with the supernatural element in the world. This is important not least because we're brothers and sisters on this planet. For some humanists, our ideological commitment to naturalism and and reason puts us at odds with adherents of various religions. It becomes easy and even comfortable for us to hold up those events of 9/11 as proof of the universal evils of religion. We cannot look at radical, violent religious extremism and call it mainstream religion. We have friends, family, co-workers, fellow townspeople who show the positive face of religion. Why exploit this tragedy to build bigger walls between us? We should see this as an opportunity to reach out to those who have felt the deep despair of fellow humans doing evil, especially fellow humans who claim the same ideology. Whether by taking solace in a higher power through a naturalistic humanist perspective, we all mourn in our own way. We can reach out and hold hands in order to understand the tragedy of 9/11 and to eliminate its causes. We can join hands to rise up against intolerance, religious division, violent extremism. We can stand as allies in our goal of peace and unity, even if we draw our inspiration from different sources. We can console the victims and those closest to victims. Even better if we do so as partners, without rancor or divisiveness. But there are still those with a different agenda who will promote violence, condone the attacks as justified, look for conspiracies under every rock, try to place blame on all those who carry labels like Muslim or believer, who have skin colors or faces similar to the hijackers. Will we join together against those who are different, or will we join together with those who seek peace? Will we seek allies who seek peace, or will we seek out enemies to blame, to ostracize, to kill? Hopefully we can all keep in perspective that we are brothers and sisters in what Carl Sagan called his pale dot. In the face of tragedy, I hope that our differences become smaller, not larger. As we consider military options, we should do so in order to free people from suffering, not to seek vengeance or destroy our enemies. We must ask ourselves hard questions about how we have reacted to the great tragedy of 9/11. Have the wars, legislation, foreign policy, and cultural shifts of the United States been for the better or for the worse? If for the worse, then we can start today to change for the better. Solutions and salvation will only come from us. It can only be better when we respect our diversity and work together. We say that we will never forget 9/11. My hope is that we will continue to learn from 9/11. As we wait for the next song, I appreciate your reflection rather than applause.
Was a decade ago. We watched the devastation as it all unfolded for us to see. And out of the skies, the attack upon this nation in New York, Pennsylvania, and D.C. In our time, we still grieve with the pain. Our safety was gone. It was so hatefully insane. It was a decade ago, in September, on the 11th day. So many unwritten stories of the families, the friends, and the loss. And when the towers fell, it was a fireman's hell. Many could be saved. We prayed, we cried. So many people died. We felt lost inside. It still seems like yesterday, a decade ago. September on the 11th day. There are monuments to the fallen in Pennsylvania and D.C. And at zero ground, still pieces are found of memories never set free. And the vision of that time will never leave. Was September on the 11th day. Decade ago, still seems like yesterday. Just like yesterday. A decade ago.
Please remain seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the crash of Flight 77 into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m.
With the publication of his first book, the best-selling The End of Faith, philosopher and neuroscientist Sam Harris became the trailblazer of the New Atheist movement. The book was born of his concern for the safety of humanity following the 9/11 attacks. Along with Dan Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and others, he has provided an eloquent voice for the millions of non-believers worldwide. Sam has personally given us permission to use his entire essay, written for the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and I'm pleased to read it to you now. Yesterday, my daughter asked, "Where does gravity come from?" She is 2.5 years old. I could say many things on this subject, most of which she could not possibly understand. But the deep and honest answer is, I don't know. What if I had said, gravity comes from God? That would be merely to stifle her intelligence and to teach her to stifle it. What if I told her, gravity is God's way of dragging people to hell, where they burn in fire, and you will burn there forever if you doubt that God exists? No Christian or Muslim can offer a compelling reason why I shouldn't say such a thing, or something morally equivalent. And yet, this would be nothing less than the emotional and intellectual abuse of a child. In fact, I have heard from thousands of people who were oppressed this way from the moment they could speak by the terrifying ignorance and fanaticism of their parents. 10 years have now passed since many of us first felt the jolt of history when the second plane crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. We knew from that moment that things could go terribly wrong in our world, not because life is unfair or moral progress impossible, but because we have failed, generation after generation, to abolish the delusions of our ignorant ancestors. The worst of these ideas continue to thrive and are still imparted in their purest form to children. What is the meaning of life? What is our purpose on earth? These are some of the great false questions of religion. We need not answer them, for they are badly posed, but we can live our answers all the same. At a minimum, we must create the conditions for human flourishing in this life, the only life in which we can be certain. That means we should not terrify our children with thoughts of hell or poison them with hatred for infidels. We should not teach our sons to consider women their future property, or convince our daughters that they are property even now. And we must decline to tell our children that human history began with magic and will end with bloody magic, perhaps soon in a glorious war between the righteous and the rest. One must be religious to fail the young so abysmally, to derange them with fear, bigotry, and superstition, even as their minds are forming. And one cannot be a serious Christian, Muslim, or Jew without doing so in some measure. Such sins against reason and compassion do not represent the totality of religion, of course, but they lie at its core. As for the rest, charity, community, ritual, and the contemplative life, we need not take anything on faith to embrace these goods. And it is one of the most damaging canards of religion to insist that we must. People of faith recoil from observations like these. They reflexively point to all the good that has been done in the name of God and to the millions of devout men and women, even within conservative Muslim societies, who do no harm to anyone. And they insist that people at every point on the spectrum of belief and unbelief commit atrocities from time to time. This is all true, of course, and truly irrelevant. The groves of faith are now ringed by a forest of non sequiturs. Whatever else may be wrong with our world, it remains a fact that some of the most terrifying instances of human conflict and stupidity would be unthinkable without religion. And the other ideologies that inspire people to behave like monsters, Stalinism, fascism, etc., are dangerous precisely because they so resemble religions. Sacrifice for the dear leader, however secular, is an act of cultic conformity and worship. Whenever human obsession is channeled in these ways, we can see the ancient framework upon which every religion was built. In our ignorance, fear, and craving for order, we created the gods. And ignorance, fear, and craving keep them with us. What defenders of religion cannot say is that anyone has ever gone berserk, or that a society ever failed because people became too reasonable, intellectually honest, or unwilling to be duped by the dogmatism of their neighbors. This skeptical attitude, born of equal parts care and curiosity, is all that atheists recommend. And it is typical of nearly every intellectual pursuit apart from theology. Only on the subject of God can smart people still imagine that they reap the fruits of human intelligence even as they plow them under. 10 years have passed since a group of mostly educated and middle-class men decided to obliterate themselves, along with 3,000 innocents, to gain entrance to an imaginary paradise. This problem was always deeper than the threat of terrorism, and our waging an interminable war on terror is no answer to it. Yes, we must destroy Al-Qaeda, but humanity has a larger project: to become sane. If September 11th, 2001 should have taught us anything, it is that we must find honest consolation in our capacity for love, creativity, and understanding. This remains possible. It is also necessary, and the alternatives are bleak. And now I'd like to introduce the Pennsylvania State Director for American Atheists, Ernest Pierce, who will introduce our final speaker.
Happy to be here. Many could not be here. On the way over here, I probably got 15 phone calls. Some are in floods, can't get out of their house. We have Jane that is totally locked in some of our members that worked the hardest wanted to be here the most. However, they too share the very feeling we do that September 11th is not a time to look past, but to learn and move forward. We share that same view. Since 1963, American Atheists has been the leading organization fighting for separation of church and state. Our founder, Madeline Murray O'Hara, said one thing about religion that blows my mind still today. We'd like hospitals built. Instead of prayer, we'd like action. And we have to end war. Religious war, be it any war that's a stifle to our humanity. David Silverman is president of American Atheists. He carries our voice with a passion and fury that few have, few understand. And he carries a lawsuit right now that is so critical to the United States. And we hope that we win this lawsuit in the basis of September 9/11 and the damage that was done as a way to carry ourselves forward. So with no further ado, I introduce David Silverman, our leader, and to some, our spokesperson for atheism.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank you all for coming today on this solemn and important occasion, and I'm especially appreciative of our newest local partner, the Pennsylvania Nonbelievers, for arranging this event and my visit. I was here just a few months ago protesting Mayor Thompson's illegal endorsement of religion when she asked all of her constituents to pray to God to rescue Harrisburg from its financial troubles. I look around today and I guess God said no. 10 years ago today, America was the victim of the largest faith-based attacks in her history. I used to live here in Harrisburg, but by then, by 2001, I'd moved to New Jersey. And from my house, I could see the smoke. I could see it from my office at Bell Labs. I could smell the smoke from my home. And the dust from the disaster covered the windows in my house and my car. My wife, whose office was in Newark, personally watched in terror as the towers fell. Powerless to do anything to help, I left my work early, gathered my family, and cried with them as we contacted all of our friends to verify that they had, in fact, all survived. But I'm not here today to speak only about the victims of the World Trade Center. I'm here to talk about those who could do something and did. The passengers of Flight 93. There is no footage of the flight crashing as there is of the towers falling and the Pentagon burning. And perhaps as a result, the passengers of Flight 93 are often overlooked, when indeed they must be recognized for their actions and their results. You see, atheists view the world as a material entity. Action is king. And prayer is a potentially harmful waste of time and energy. And the events of 9/11 show not only how religion can and was used to harm fellow human beings, but also how action can help overcome that waste and yield real, tangible results. Before 9/11, planes were hijacked occasionally. The general rule was to go along to get along. Do what the hijackers tell you, and they'll let you go. Don't be a hero. Don't take action. The Muslim terrorists took full advantage of that mentality and took 4 planes hostage with box cutters. People sat and obeyed and died. And if not for Flight 93, it may have happened again. But once the passengers knew what was happening, they did the only thing they could to stop the terrorists. They took action. And they took their plane down in an effort to save their own lives and the lives of unknown Americans in unknown buildings, which were the unknown targets of the terrorists. Some call the passengers survivalists. I call them heroes. They could have sat and obeyed or prayed away the opportunity to help other people. But in the face of near certain death, they took action. Despite what was surely imminent demise, they fought, they resisted, and though they died, they won. I was on a plane right after the attacks. I remember clearly how few passengers there were on the plane and how scary it was, even for the most experienced air travelers, to be sitting on a plane for the first time since September 11th. I also remember the pilot's announcement, which made me and every other passenger feel better about flying again. The pilot said, every passenger on the plane was now an FAA safety officer. And he was right. Every person on that plane was ready to take down a terrorist or die trying. Never again would we sit and take orders from knife-wielding religious fanatics in the hopes of getting home safe someday. Everyone on that plane was the terrorist's worst nightmare. This country changed in many ways on 9/11, and one very significant way was this change in mentality, this exit from compliance in the face of threat. This change didn't come from prayer. It didn't come from divine intervention. It came from humans taking action. Action beats inaction every time. Religion hurt America on 9/11, but action is what stopped it from happening again. Now take a moment to look at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Once again, you see action doing what it can to counter religious violence. First responders came in and immediately began helping people out of the doomed buildings. Once again, death was possible, and fear, well, that must have been unimaginable. Once again, no sign of divine help. It was human action that saved the survivors, and while I heard nothing about rescue workers praying before bravely entering the buildings, I certainly would hate to have been the first person not to be rescued because the time ran out, because rescuers were praying before taking action. American Atheists supports action. And when action is required, we are there to take the lead. We know that when people get off their knees and stand on their feet, things actually happen. And we urge all Americans to learn from the passengers of Flight 93 and take action here at home. Because although we are not facing imminent death today, we are facing a continuing rise of religious extremism here in America, especially in the political arena. Today, American freedom, the American freedom that was so hated by the Muslim terrorists, is under attack by the Christian right. From mythology in the classroom to restrictions in the bedroom, priests and preachers and the politicians in their pockets have lowered the bar in basic freedoms we should all take for granted. It should not shock anyone to hear that the Supreme Court now leans only by a slim and aging 5-4 margin in favor of the separation of church and state, without which true religious freedom is impossible. It wasn't too long ago that the politician who wore magic underwear was considered a crazy extremist. But this year, this seems downright moderate. I feel it's important to confront issues of religious freedom with all candidates. So I'm asking you today to take action this year and press the following question to all political candidates. What is more important, the Bible or the Constitution? Anyone who says the former is in the same mindset as the terrorists on 9/11, that their religion is above the law of the land. In an effort to conceal this tendency toward theocracy, the candidates will try to avoid answering the question, but it must be pressed as we move into the next election. Surely, we should all agree that anyone who holds public office must represent all their constituents and must place the law of the land above their personal religion and equality above theocracy. I urge you to support freedom of religion and freedom of conscience, and to cast your vote only for those candidates who view the Constitution as what it is, the highest law in the country. And speaking of equality, or lack thereof, you can see the Christian right drooling over 9/11, trying every angle to make an American tragedy a Christian event. They want their preachers preaching, but nobody else. They want their speakers speaking, but nobody else. And they want their symbols in the memorial, but not ours. Too bad. American Atheist is here to make sure 9/11 is remembered correctly as an attack by one sect of one religion on all America, including some 500 atheists who never went home that day. Pennsylvania and New York have several things in common. In both states, according to the USA Today, the number one religious segment is Catholic. And in both states, the number two segment is us. Yes, us. Indeed, in New York, the number of atheists is nearly 3 times higher than the number of Jews. And in Pennsylvania, atheists outnumber Baptists, Lutherans, and Methodists. We are everywhere. And best of all, we are the fastest growing segment in all 50 states. And we will be counted. We will be heard. And we will never re-enter the closet of conformity again. 9/11 is a call for all of us to take a stand against religious extremism wherever it exists, especially at home. Step one is action. And that first action is coming out of the closet as an atheist. Thank you very much.
Please remain seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the collapse of the South Tower of the World Trade Center at 9:59 a.m.
In just a few moments, we will be at the 10-year point for the crash of Flight 93. At this time, we have 3 volunteers from Penn State who have offered to read the names of the victims of Flight 93. If you would come up, introduce yourselves, and begin reading the names, and we will interrupt at the moment for a moment of silence.
Hello, I'm Scott Brown, president of the Penn State Atheist Agnostic Association.
I'm Laura, I'm the secretary.
And I'm Mickey, another member. Today we will remember the victims of Flight 93 who prevented another American tragedy. Captain Jason M. Dahl.
First Officer Leroy Homer.
Flight Attendant Maureen G. Bain.
Flight Attendant Sandy Wow Bradshaw.
Flight Attendant Wanda Anita Green.
Flight Attendant C.C. Ross Lyles.
Flight Attendant Deborah Jacobs Welsh.
Christian Adams.
Todd M. Beamer.
Alan Anthony Eamon.
Mark Bingham.
Deora Francis Baldwin.
Marion R. Britton.
Thomas E. Burnett Jr.
William Joseph Cashman.
Georgine Rose Corrigan.
Patricia Cushing.
Joseph DeLuca.
Patrick Joseph Driscoll.
Edward Porter Felt.
Jane C. Folger.
Colleen L. Frazier.
Andrew Sonny Garcia.
Jeremy Logan Glick.
Kristen Osterholm White Gold.
Lauren Catuzzi Granpolas and unborn child.
Donald Freeman Green.
Linda Grundy.
Richard J. Guadango.
Toshia Kugen.
Hilda Marchini.
Waleska Martinez.
Nicole Carroll Miller.
Louis L. Knack II.
Donald Arthur Peterson.
Jean Hoadley Peterson.
Mark David Rothenberg.
Christine Ann Snyder.
John Tudley Mann.
And Honor Elizabeth Guenio. Thank you.
Please remain seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the crash of Flight 93 at Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m.
Beautiful morning, I'm off to work, hustling to the car, still buttoning my shirt. Like every other day, I turn on the radio. There's something about planes crashing and buildings burning. The minutes passing by, I'm still learning what's going on. Nobody knows. It's the day the lights went out, the day they came back on, the day our hearts were broken and our spirits strong. I always will remember the way we came together. Mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger, I'll always remember. Same time each year, it comes back on the news. These images and tragedies just giving me the blues. I look at my life, who I am and how I feel. I wanna be a better mother and better person, better friend to those who are hurting, and make sure the moments in my life are real. It's the day the lights went out, the day the lights came on, the day our hearts were broken and our spirits strong. I always will remember the way we came together. Mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger, remember. It's the day the lights went out, the day the lights came on, the day we got it right, the day we got it wrong. It's the day when we were weak, the day when we were strong, the day we found a better way, oh, to get along. I always will remember the way we came together, mother and father, sister and brother, total strangers helping each other. The day the world grew bigger, I'll always remember. I'll always remember.
Please remain seated as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the collapse of the North Tower of the World Trade Center, which occurred at 10:28 a.m. 10 years ago today.
That concludes our program. I'd like to say thank you for all of you for coming out. I know that Sunday morning for atheists, that's not the best time. You're not used to getting up early, and thank you for doing that, fighting this weather and floods and so on. I certainly appreciate our speakers coming, Dave, Jason, Linda, Jan, everyone who spoke here, Brian. I think you did a wonderful job. So, folks, thank you for coming. That concludes our program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, we should actually thank Carl. He did most of the organizing. Let's give him. Carl, no relation. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Hopefully we won't have to do this again in the future.